Welcome back. We are today making a crustless pumpkin pie, and some of the benefits of this is you don't get the additional carbs with the crust. Some people just don't like the crust. It's not as big, I'm not as big of a fan of the crust, but it also cuts down on calories and, like I said, carbs. And this is pretty easy. It's very similar to your normal pumpkin pie. You don't have a crust though. The baking is a little bit different. So we're going to preheat our oven to 325 and then we're going to start mixing. So we'll start out with a can of pumpkin, and you can use whatever your favorite brand of pumpkin pie filling is. We just have the good old Food Club brand. Some people like the ones that already have the spices mixed into it. We usually don't do that just because then we can control if you like a certain spice, or sometimes if you don't like how they spice it, you can do whatever you want if you just get plain pumpkin. Another thing you could use is you can use sweet potatoes or squash in here too if you like those options better. Next, you're going to use a can of evaporated milk, and we're going to pour that in here. And another option for this, if you don't want to use evaporated milk, you can use 2%. Skim is too thin and it doesn't really set up, but if you use 2% or whole milk or anything like that, it should act the same. So we're going to mix this together, and then once we do that, we have 2 eggs here, so we're going to crack those in. And this, again, you can use egg alternatives if you don't eat eggs, or if you have egg beaters or something like that on hand, you can definitely use those. So we're going to keep mixing that a little bit here. And one thing to note with this, it'll have to cook longer on a cooler bake time than your normal pie. And that is just because we don't want this to get super crusty or hard. We just want it to cook nicely all the way through. So once you have that, the next thing is we need to add sugar. If you forget to add sugar, it's just not going to taste like pumpkin pie. I mean, you definitely can do it, or you can use a sugar substitute, but it'll taste fairly bitter if you do not add sugar. So we're adding 3/4 cup of sugar, and again, you can use stevia or Splenda or whatever. You could possibly even use honey or coconut sugar, depending on what you usually use to cook with. Once we get that mixed in, then we're going to go into our spices. And if you have a certain set spices, you can add those now. Otherwise, we are going to add some cinnamon. We're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And these bulk ones are great. We always get those, they're quite a bit cheaper. But we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we are going to go down to 1/4 teaspoon of ginger and 1/4 teaspoon of our nutmeg here. And some recipes don't use nutmeg, so again, use whatever your favorite combination is. Another thing you can do is pre-mix your pumpkin spice and then just add a little over a teaspoon to your next batch. Then finally, we're only going to add 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, and be careful with this because if you overspice with the cloves, it's pretty noticeable. So now that we have that, we're going to mix this up a little bit more, make sure we get those spices all the way through. And then we're going to pour this into our pie pan. And you're going to want to make sure you really grease your pie pan down to make sure this doesn't stick, because otherwise it might just turn into a gooey mess when you're trying to serve it. But now that we have this all mixed up, and you can use whatever size pie pan, if you have an 8-inch, 9-inch, or you can use a cake pan, you'll just have to watch your cook times a little bit more. So we're going to pour this in here. Make sure we get all of the pumpkin pie filling in there. And remember, you're going to want this at 325, not your normal 350. And once we put that in, we're going to bake it for about 50 minutes. I'd start checking it around 40. If you're using a larger pie pan or a larger pan, it'll be a lot less time, so maybe start checking around 30 minutes. just to make sure it doesn't burn. But we're gonna put that in and then we'll come back and see it once it comes out. Thank you.